I've got a good cross-section here, two of the major regional brands, but with people who have worked around the globe in different scenarios. So we got a good hybrid cross-section there. Gensler, of course, one of the better-known design firms in the region, and Paul, who represents a specialist consultant role in the same design sphere. So I wanted to start off, although they've had their introduction, to say in their own words a little bit what they've done that's relevant to the panel session this afternoon, and then take it from there with some case studies and a few key questions. So we'll start with Ian. Alphabetically. Alphabetically. You're not getting off the hook.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. We had a wonderful introduction before, so I won't waste time. I'll just say that I've been here in Asia. I think Elvis was still around. I saw him on a picture earlier, so I've been around Asia quite some time. Worked with Hyatt and New World and with Shangri-La. I'm not technical. I'm not an architect. I'm not an engineer. I'm actually an operator. I have an F&B background and general management. And at some point, I got involved with renovations, new builds, and openings, and that's how I got into technical services. So that's really my background. Do you want me to go straight into an example? Or?
No, then we'll go over to Don.
Right.
Hi, everybody. I think I had a fairly full introduction there. Just to say, I'm an architect to training, and I've worked on a wide spectrum of projects, many different types of practice areas, and I've been present in the market here in Asia for over 28 years. And I've worked in many different countries. I've had the benefit of opportunities in Thailand initially, Hong Kong for many years, and then spent time in Vietnam, 8 years, opening and running 2 design practices, one in Ho Chi Minh City and one in Hanoi. Then I went back to Hong Kong for a short period, and as we've described, I'm now in Singapore, loving the life in Singapore, and no longer an emerging but a highly developed city, and thoroughly enjoying all of the benefits of that. But I do still enjoy my forays to Bangkok, Ho Chi Minh City, and the Philippines, Manila.
Adrian.
Well, just keep it short to what we're talking about today. Like the rest of the panel, basically, if you like, global, educated in the West, learned wisdom in the East, and practices in every marketplace with the knowledge of those localities and the expertise from our areas to get the best of both worlds, which is what this panel is all about today.
And yes, I've been in Asia over, I think, 10 years for this one now, but I've lived in Malaysia. I worked there as an architect. I studied in Korea at Kyunggi University. I studied architecture there for a semester, and now based in Singapore. But prior to that, I was in the UAE, in Dubai, working on hotel development with Jumeirah Group. And I think we got a lot to talk about today, so we'll just jump into that. Yeah.
Right. Okay, go back again, alphabetically again. We'll talk now a little bit about an example in each one of these gentlemen's careers of striking the right balance between local and global standards in design, building materials used, technology, cultural influences, and ecological diversity, as well as project management. So if we could start with Ian.
Okay, I would say lately, as part of Dusit's expansion, we have projects in Bhutan and in Nepal. And I think those are great examples of local and global, and how do you strike the balance between the two. Obviously, a lot of things are done locally, usually on the artistic side. In terms of global, you're probably looking more at the standards, trying to implement global standards into a market where the standards could be regarded as flexible, right? And being an international brand, you need to have those regimes in place. In terms of, again, the question of what do you mean by local comes up. a lot of the items that are supplied into Nepal and Bhutan come from India. So we regard that as local. It's nearby. Not just in terms of product, but also in terms of consultants. So quite a few of our consultants are also India-based and Thai-based as well on the interior design side. The other great input on a local level is, of course, on a cultural level. Not just in terms of the design, but also in terms of the outreach programs that you have. So, for example, particularly in, say, Nepal, the hotel we're doing in Kathmandu, the owners are actually from Tibet. So they have a very high level of artistic input that they want to reflect on that. Whereas the hotel that we're doing in Namho Buddha, which is about an hour and a half outside of Kathmandu, we have huge outreach programs into the local community because it's going to be the major employer in that area. And so on an education front, there's a huge drive towards education and development there. And Dusit are known for their education. We have a number of educational programs here in Thailand, and we've just opened up a school in Manila as well. So I would say on the artistic and the cultural side in those locations are mainly local. Yeah.
Just a question. You mentioned you started off with standards. One of the I'd like you to put in a little bit perspective what we're talking about today. Are we talking about size of the door frame, size of the room, where the plugs are, safety issues, all those concerns? Yeah, fire life safety.
Principally fire life safety.
Yeah.
And also standards of some of the equipment, the boring stuff like MEP, size of pumps, and things like that. And again, suppliers are very integral in that part of whether it's local or global. But it's mainly, I would say, on the technical side that is that global standard.
That's what it's boiled down to. But I can go back, we can go back 20 or 30 years. I'll take Hilton as an example. I apologize anybody from Hilton's in the room, but you could walk into a Hilton in Trinidad and Tobago, in Jakarta, Indonesia, or anywhere, and you knew you were in a Hilton. The color of the wood, where the bed was, the tiles, everything. We've gone a long way from those days, is my point, where it was legislated. I mean, there are still brands around that have the meter-thick book, but...
Well, we have the meter-thick book, but that's, again, really on the technical side, because the countries that we're growing in, local technical standards are, as I said, variable, right? And rather flexibly enforced sometimes. So, but it's interesting as a Thai brand, we're Thai brands, how do we take Thailand outside of Thailand? And that's always been the question. And so now we're taking a step back from that. So
why? The why?
Well, yeah, the why. We're moving away from that now. So 10 or 15 years ago or 30 years ago, there was a Hilton look. So you had America in wherever it was, and I've been to that upside down Hilton in Trinidad. But taking culture from somewhere like Thailand and adapting it overseas. So we've sort of identified 4 or 5 touch points, and we're definitely not trying to build a Thai look hotel in Oman or wherever else, wherever we are. Yeah. Okay.
Don?
Thank you. Thanks, Ian. Well, of course, Gensler is a global firm. We have 50 offices globally, but we take our approach locally very, very, very seriously. We leverage our global platform and our expertise to bring it to the local markets so that we can deliver high quality of design excellence in the location where we're present. But the local aspect of what we do is, as I say, extremely important to us. It's very important to us in our work that our work is seen to be very authentic to the location. We believe in authenticity. We believe in cultural resilience in terms of our projects and our projects' design. And we believe that it's very important that the project should be rooted in the location, in the locale where it's present. So we believe in placemaking in our projects to improve the user's experience, whether it's the use of a material a particular material which may be authentic to the location, whether it's a use of a particular placemaking tool such as a colonnade or a square that's particularly featured in the architecture of the location, whether it's a reference to a particular industrial solution in a port, city or town. We highly believe in bringing that local flavor to our work and working with global brands. Sometimes that is a challenge because the global brands, in terms of our clients that come to us all the time, are also looking to have their projects authentic to their own brand and to their own culture. I just want to talk about one project, and it was interesting there that you talked about Hilton, because the project I was going to talk about actually was the Hilton project in Saigon. We were appointed as the architects to design this project in Saigon, and it's a location where Hilton have wanted to have a project for quite some time. And we're perhaps all familiar with the challenge of getting projects in Vietnam. And this particular project location is a fantastic location, right by the river, beautiful opportunity, but very, very small. The land was very, very small. And of course, Hilton wanted to have all of their brand requirements, their operators wanted the brief in terms of their space, their ballroom, etc. But it basically didn't fit onto the site. We couldn't provide the full-size ballroom for Hilton on this site. We went to great gymnastics to provide them the largest ballroom that they could have. If you want to talk about authenticity, we looked at materiality, we looked at treatment on the facade, referring to some vernacular architectural treatments. But to me, the most successful thing about this project was in the placemaking, in the arrival experience, because I said the site was very, very tight. So it was very difficult in the arrival experience to actually get the full-size arrival lobby on the ground floor. So in negotiations with them, they allowed us to elevate the lobby to the top level of the podium, which again is counter, I believe, to Hilton standards to do so. But what it achieved was, when you arrive at this hotel, when you come through the density of Ho Chi Minh City by car, through that traffic, all those motorbikes, etc., and you arrive there at this hotel in this densely packed city, you enter the ground floor lobby, and you get in lifts, and you come up in the lifts, and you turn around, and the lift doors open, and you step out into this elevated lobby, and there's a full glass window right in front of you, and you get the full view of the Saigon River, 180-degree view. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. And that's an arrival experience. That's authenticity in terms of the geography and the location of the project.
Taking advantage of nature, really, that snaking river as it goes by there.
Well, it's beautiful. It's the place.
No one has it yet.
Yeah.
Trying to tie Ian's comments together with yours a little bit and going to the issue of local flavors, which I also call sense of place, which some of the brands in the market today make a very big thing of. Rosewood's one of them. Is, has it gone too far to the sense of place? It's become everybody's mantra, but then you've got guys going in the other direction. Bill Bensley is one. You never know what he's going to come up with. You go to Phu Quoc at the Marriott, or you go to Shintamani or Shintamani Wild in Phnom Penh, in Siem Reap, and you're just amazed. It's complete fantasy. And it goes to what the previous presentation wants, is that, do people really want to be that deep into where they are? Do they want to forget where they are and they're in just another place? Can you comment on that from a design point of view, and really reflecting discussions that you've had with owners on this, because they've got a lot. The ego enters into the picture as well.
I think it really depends on project by project, and whether the lifestyle project or whether it's city project, or the location of the project, what the purpose of the project is, what the purpose of the hotel is. You've mentioned some great examples there, which I think is absolutely must be about the location. I mean, the Bensley Hotel in Cambodia is fantastic. Must be a fantastic experience. But then there's other case samples where the consumer doesn't want that. They want to have the safety of the brand that they know. They want, when they're going to the location, they want to know that they're going to a Marriott or a Hilton or a Dusit or Centara, and that they're going to find what's inherently important to them and the reason why they're going to that hotel. I'll share something.
Sounds like us, the business traveler.
Yeah, well, I'll share something with you, actually, a little story. I found out yesterday that I actually have to go to Kazakhstan tomorrow. And this was a big surprise to me. I didn't know I was going, and it's been a very rushed trip. So as a result, we're struggling to find me a hotel. I'm actually booked into a local hotel. I'm not booked into an international branded hotel. And I think this is an experience that I could honestly say, I wish I was booked into an international branded hotel. So I think there is a case for it, yes.
Adrian.
Yes, just to add a couple of dimensions to it. This is actually for one of the projects when I used to live and work in India. And shopping malls in the West are designed, as everywhere else, to basically protect you from the environment. Right? Makes perfect sense in India. But in the West, you do it with a glass roof to let sunlight in and keep the wind out. So many malls in India have glass roofs and let sunlight in and heat. And everybody walks around on the edge of the building, right? Because the principle of that design wasn't carried through into the natural environment. But you ask any Indian designers, they've been building with indirect light into spaces for centuries. And that's where, if you like, people haven't taken a modern building, gone to external architects, designers, and not related it to the environment that they're in. And I think there's a lot that we can all learn from that process, looking what is right, what is wrong, what is relevant, what's not. And my great experience in all these projects is actually the team that's built around it, that's open to new ideas on all sides and not have a hierarchy. And I think if you look at local and global and think it is as one party is superior in any way, you have failed in anything you're going to start out to do.
Paul?
And just carrying on with what you were saying earlier, I think that as you go up the stars in terms of a hotel design, I think that the international, the global more comes in, because if you are staying at a Four Seasons or a Mandarin Oriental, there's a certain level of luxury expected that, quite frankly, is not found on the street. You don't. I've never seen a street paved in gold, right? And so the higher you go up, I think that the themes that come through, I think you can introduce the motifs, the lighting, the textures. In Middle East, a lot of mashrabiyah came in, a lot of geometry, right? Here we get a lot of color, a lot of lacquer. But the fact is that there's that segment where the street can come in and you can bring that local culture in a lot more. But if I hear another food and beverage concept that talks about bringing, hawker stalls into a hotel in Asia, I think I'll scream, because it's the same thing every time. And where I'm looking now in terms of the projects I'm working on is actually trying to revisit what that all-day dining is and look at who the consumer is and actually try to encourage it to be a little bit more, a little less about the street and a little bit more about the people that are going to be, giving them an experience. Why not have a great Italian restaurant in Bangkok in your hotel? It doesn't have to be. If you want to really go for good Thai food, you're not going to have it in the hotel. You're going to go out to some place that specializes in that. So, in terms of going global or local, I think that there needs to be, going back to that, I think there needs to be a way that we address the fact that a lot of the better experiences are actually found outside the hotel, and that we shouldn't be trying to box the entire city into a hotel. We should be looking at that property as a place where you can launch from and where you can have your refuge from after a hot day in Mumbai.
Well, we're not good at F&B in the hotels. The most successful guys are the guys who are out on the street who know how to bring the people to a place that isn't inside a hotel. I learned that about 5 years ago, and it's worked ever since.
Absolutely. I mean, my favorite hawker stall in Singapore is a Michelin star hawker stall, right? I mean, you just go down for your beef noodle. It's just quick and easy, $5 a box, but I get a great dining experience. I don't need to spend the money at no menu or something like that and feel like I'm just watching the money burn. Right? It's not.
You need a bit of a paradigm shift, and again, not self-promotion, but Dusit are about to open 2 hotels in Bangkok called Asai, and they're actually driven by the second generation of our ownership. And Asai Hotel, the owner, Kung Champ, his view is actually he doesn't want the hotel guests to stay in the hotel. He wants the hotel guests to be outside the hotel, and he's trying to get, the whole idea is to try to get locals who live in those areas, and we'll put them into residential areas essentially, are to come into the hotel. So F&B, we don't do our own F&B. We've got well-known chefs and said, here's the space, it's your space, you do your F&B in our hotel. So that's...
No, I agree. And look, I mean, hotels used to be designed to protect people, right? I mean, we all remember when you'd travel, you could never ask for ice. You know, you had your traveler's checks, you had to find the bank. You know, it was don't drink the water. It was all these, you know, make sure that the food, you know, you have to go to these special, you'd eat at a hotel because you knew you weren't going to get food poisoning. But now with bottled water everywhere, ATMs everywhere, you know, the digital economy, hotels are inversions now. You should be encouraging guests to go out and to discover, even if it is on a business trip. You should have that feel. And I love what you did on that piece where you're not talking about the architecture in your building, you're talking about the view and the experiences you come through. And that's what we should be doing in all the hospitality projects. I mean,
Well, that's where all the lifestyle hotel groups have headed. They're bringing it in from the outside and trying to bring that experience into the guest who doesn't want to go outside, and also moves in the other direction too. Just going back to Ian for a moment, if we look at, how much does the brand and its positioning, take maybe an example out of the Dusit portfolio, affect the balance in the equation between global versus local? How much does it, is the first question, and the second part is, how much should it?
And of course, the other thing is very much on, I think you touched on it as well, about what is the objective of that development. Okay, so usually by the time it comes to us, we've already chosen a brand that fits into a particular location, and of the brands that we have, there is one brand which is essentially has more tie in it, whereas our other brands tend to focus much more on delivering a very practical product. And this is one of the reasons why we went with Asai, is because Asai has an extremely heavy locally sourced dynamic to it. And again, this point about hotels wanting to bring the experience to the guest, actually we're telling the guest to get out, right? Get the guest out of the hotel and get the local residents into the hotel, in terms of some of the F&B experiences there, right? And keep it extremely simple. It's also a paradigm shift for our sales and marketing teams. They always want to sell rooms, with a ballroom and with meeting rooms, right? So it's a paradigm shift for them to move away from that dynamic. So I think it's a very competitive landscape out there. There's a lot of brands going after more limited opportunities. And so as brands, we have to be extremely flexible. We have to be extremely flexible to the objective of the owner and the developer. And we need to, in turn, find a balance between that objective and our own brand image, right? I hope that explains
So
it.
you're saying you could walk into an Asai and it'll have a stronger sense of place local than a Dusit would. I was in the
Essentially,
Cebu.
yes.
I was in the
Essentially,
Cebu
yes.
Dusit,
Yeah, right.
and the design is not very Thai. It's very modern, and you walk in, you get the
Correct.
Y, and you get the people dressed in the Thai outfits. It's a little bit incongruous.
It's a little incongruous, and it's something that we are continuing to refine and develop. Some of our developments, frankly, we've stepped into them quite late. So that development in Mactan actually was built for another brand.
Sheraton.
So we took it over and adapted it.
Yeah, right. Yes, quite.
That happens a lot, fortunately or unfortunately. Okay, where do this is a question for Adrian. Where do brands draw the line in respect of global versus local? Is it really is it all about international standards with a veneer of local flavor to pacify owners and satisfy customer expectation? How does it work? Owners today have a stronger and stronger view, much stronger than even 10 years ago, as you know, about what they want to see in their hotels. So how do you balance, and who does the buying and all those issues as well?
I think Ian mentioned it partly before, and partly it's because as both Thai brands, in the scale of the global economy, we have a slightly different attitude to these issues to international brands. But more fundamentally than that, the issue is if you are an international brand selling it to a business unit, company, business travel, and I used to work for such brands, your number one fear is to be sued back in the States. So the issue there is that if there's a fire in, shall we say, a Holiday Inn in Mexico City, and somebody sends you to a business trip to a Crowne Plaza in Shanghai, you can be sued for going to a dangerous operated hotel. When we sell vacation holidays, it's actually a very different setup. It's the difference when people on business will never travel on AirAsia, heck, but when they're on holiday, who cares? Gets me where I want to, when on time I want to get there. So when we approach it a bit, what Ian's mentioned before, it comes more now from an engineering standard. And it's not just engineering from an international standard, but also take the next level forward is, can that piece of equipment be maintained locally? If they don't have the part, then we've got to look at what is that engineering standard and what it needs to be, what's the life safety standard to be. But even then, we're not going to so international still. If the local law is that the 2-story building is not sprinkled or 5-story building is not sprinkled, and your customer is 40% local, right, and you're moving to that environment on a holiday environment, we are not so sensitive on those issues. But we will look at it from a fundamental fire engineering point of view. Is it a safe design, but not that you have to do X, Y, and Z, right? So we wouldn't do as in the UK with the terrible residential fire when you have a 17-story building with a single means of escape, right? That's bad engineering design. Right? We will look at it though that we make sure the building is safe. You're safe in your room, but there's means of getting out by yourself. So we take a more pragmatic view on it for there. But if you take from a design philosophy point of view, we are taking a much more wider, more radical change. And it's not so much about being Thai or what's hospitality, but actually just looking at what's happening in the lifestyle industry, led mainly by retail. What do consumers want, and are the hotels reflecting it? Even myself recently, I was on holiday in Europe, and the first time I stayed in Airbnb. Sacrilege for a hotelier. But why? Because I was traveling with my elderly mother-in-law. We wanted connecting rooms. We wanted to make sure we were safe. We could not get that through any hotel booking. Right? We are now as a company investing heavily in being able to book connecting rooms, which we build into our family hotels to offer that generation change. And we're relooking what the consumer wants. We then add, yes, some hospitality touches, but we take the advantage that we're in Thailand. If you were in Germany, people think German engineering is the best. Thai hospitality has a great name. We want to celebrate that, but not necessarily by being over Thai. And that's how we look at these issues.
I mean, going back to my time back with Centara, I mean, there and then in the early days when we were still very Thai-centric in terms of location as well as thinking, when we started to move overseas, it was always to reach back. We had to have suppliers out of Bangkok, people that we could touch, feel, deliver from, go to the factory, the whole thing. And that had to change over time as we went overseas, but it was very difficult to break away for number of reasons. One, because it was so easy. Thailand was such a great place to source all this stuff. I don't know what happened at Dusit, but as you go internationally, again, some of the international brands, if you look at Four Seasons or Marriott or some of them, they've got their book. You can only use this suppliers. You can only use these specs. You got to buy from them. You can tender here. All that's broken down, I think, in the last 10 years dramatically. It's probably gone, as you said.
Basically gone. I mean,
Yeah.
we built a hotel in Bhutan with a partner in Vietnam doing the furniture, and they set up a little factory in Bhutan. So that shows you.
Well, and the second, the Rasfushi in Maldives, was prefabbed in New Zealand, I think, and shipped up.
Yes.
I mean, that's the other extreme.
Yes, there was prefabbed in Maldives. Maldives is a classic example of almost nothing is local. At the moment, we're bringing stone from India to reclaim an island, and we're looking around the world. We're looking now at Turkey as the place for outsource all the furniture coming in. So, in that sense, the world is global, and it isn't about having to be a local supplier in that marketplace. We look at what is the right supplier.
Well, it leads on to the question for Paul is, how important are suppliers in this drive to localization?
Well, I think that I'll bridge into that, because what I'll start with is that the design guidelines, and this is what I always say, they're not the design laws, right? That they're guidance. They're guidance notes, they're best practice notes, and everyone at this table would say, if someone else has come up with a better way to make a wall with an acoustic lining, then we're all over it. We're going to take it. So when you look at the guidelines, you shouldn't be looking at them from a place where you need to achieve everything. It's a helping hand to be able to bring you over the line, to be able to. Yeah, it's the way to avoid mistakes. So in that sense, I think too much emphasis is placed on the design guidelines or brand standards. You must have this type of cooking equipment. You must have this type of television. And with the Maldives, I built a resort there that were prefabbed from Bali. We even brought the Balinese construction workers over. They lived in a couple of them while they were building them as they went along. And it's that kind of solution that you have to find. Now, with suppliers going global or local, I think it goes back to something that Adrian said, which was, how easy is it to replace? I'm well up for bringing in, Italian sanitary ware into one of my projects, but if one piece breaks, is it going to be a 16-week wait? Because if it's going to be 16 weeks, that's how many room nights you're going to lose just waiting for that part to come. So that's going to be replaced by something local. So the first question would be your supply chain, how quickly it can come, and how you're able to respond to the actual business of the hotel itself. And I think that's critical with any supply. So happy to go global, but most of the time you go local just to avoid that kind of stuff. I have one client who has photovoltaic cells that have been sitting in a shipyard in Jakarta for over 2 years because he's not willing to pay the harbor master a little bonus, let's call it, for allowing them out, right? So sometimes you bring those things in and you can't even get them. And it's just not, you have to be practical. You have to be pragmatic when it comes to these things. It's nice to bring in pieces from around the world, but to me, generally, it's local just because of the fact that it's a hotel business and things are going to break and you need to replace those parts.
A couple of more questions before we turn it open for questions and answers, but and this one I'll throw open to the group. How does one thing that I've encountered and been on both sides of in the past probably 3 or 4 years especially, and probably the brunt of it coming from the fastest growing market today, which is Vietnam, is the very heavy involvement of owners in procurement, insisting, I wouldn't say to hijack, but some of the firms that we always recommend a procurement agency or an expert, because they soon, they look at the list and they say, you mean there's 10,000 items I got to buy? Yeah, there's 10,000 times 5 of some of those items. And, they sort of say, well, we definitely going to do that ourselves. There's a lot of money here, and my brother runs a furniture factory, and my sister does the curtains and all this. So how has that trend affected the balance between globalization and localization? It almost means that you have to find a way to compromise where you build something that you would normally source overseas, or you procure it locally, but to oversee specs, which is another challenge, of course. So comments from you guys on that?
Maybe I'll just start. Just to add to what Paul said, I think, procuring materials locally as well. It's also about the answer to sustainability and resilience. If you can find the materials locally to use which do the job to the same quality, you're reducing the carbon footprint just dramatically. So sorry, what was your question?
Oh, really? The intrusion, I would say,
Oh yes, I
of
remember.
owners
Sorry,
into
sorry.
the sourcing and procurement area.
Yeah, I would just add very quickly to that, and then hand on to the experts, that if in Vietnam, and apologies if we have Vietnamese in the room, I don't mean anything too much by this, but in fact, it applies to any national. So but in Vietnam, if you have an owner and his sister who are taking charge of procurement for their hotel because their uncle or brother has a factory who happens to do those fabrics or furniture, then you're looking at a project that's going to be delayed for a considerable amount of time.
It happens, and not just overseas. It happens in, shall we say, when you talk about Thailand suppliers with family contacts. So it happens everywhere, as Don mentioned. It's a challenge. It's twofold of the challenge. One is that if the product is actually satisfactory, it's okay. If it's delivered on time, it's okay. But it's neither of those things, and you can't do anything about it, and the project ends up 6 months late. It's a business headache. And it's trying to get that rationale across there. It's like when Bobby was talking about the projects in India, the knowledge of what's available locally to build a project effectively is an advantage that in today's age we all have to take about in whatever marketplace. I did work on a project before where we had to import everything. It was in Hong Kong. We had to import everything from anywhere in the world other than China. Right? And it was done after '97, and they wanted to demonstrate to the global financial industry that this was to global standards, whatever they had to be, at the expense of anything done in China. Probably the last project ever done that way. Was it wise?
I had a few the other way where everything had to be imported from China.
I know. That's what it would be today, but you get these around.
I think the last part I'll put on that is I've had some clients go out and do this. I had a client in Kuwait and she went on a spending spree in China and she bought furniture from a factory. Her brother was a lawyer, and the only way I could get her to stop was to explain that none of this was fire certified. None of the fabrics, all of this stuff. So you want to go out to your cousin's factory, that's fine, but the first question you have to ask when you go back to litigation, when we talked about earlier, is show me the fire certificate, show me the proof that lacquer isn't going to go up like a Roman candle. Make sure that the guests are actually going to be safe if you use these things, because you will get sued. And even if it is a place where you're not going to get sued by your American guests, the last thing anyone wants to see is one of the brands that we're working for on the front of the BBC going up in flames in some city, and then it becomes known that they were under-specifying their materials. The damage that it's going to do to the entire portfolio, the breaking of trust you would have with your guests would be far more damaging. And that's where, from a brand point of view, you do have to put your foot down and say, sorry, your cousin just doesn't work.
On a more positive note,
Let's go back up. I had a case where the owner bought through Alibaba in China,
Well, this stuff goes on. But on a more positive note, I would say we are working with owners who sometimes have a wonderful vision. And we have a project, many of you here will know, in Bangkok, where the old glorious Dusit Thani has been closed, and we're going to redevelop it. We are redeveloping it. And the owner has a very clear vision of the materials he wants to use. He wants the new Dusit Thani to showcase the very best of Thailand. But he understands that there are some stones and some materials that will look wonderful as little pieces and highlights, but he understands they may not be great in the lobby, right? And so when you're working with someone like that who has that great vision, and he starts from the high ground. He says, I want to showcase the very best that Thailand has got. And then we go out to the local suppliers, the ones who are very well known here. We start talking about fabrics and wall coverings and lightings and things like that. And they want to create something that hopefully when the hotel opens will be a very proud showcase of Thailand. And that's a great thing to see. Sometimes that does actually happen. I know also in India that there are a couple of owners there who really have got money to spend, and they really want to showcase the very best. And that's when there's a positive, always a negative. Yeah.
Last question before we throw it open. In the end, if we look at this complex process that we go through to balance local versus global, who really calls the shots? Is it the owner, the operator, the supplier, the customer, or the design firm? How should it work?
Well, it's not the design
Bank
firm.
account.
Sometimes it's a design firm and the owner, though.
In our experience, it's always the owner and the operator, and we are stuck slap bang in the middle.
And so you should be. Ian said best, the bank account, which is usually the owner, where money does talk, but the operator does have a say on the points, as Paul eloquently explained. And the designers then got to make some sense out of it. And I think that's the right balance. I think it should be the business balance.
You think in the end it works out in most cases?
Yes.
Generally.
Maybe persuade the owners.
But I think as well that the brand has to come in, because a lot of times when I'm working with owners, they have a certain vision, and it happens in a lot of emerging economies where they've seen hotels in different places and they want to bring back, but that, you know, they're putting in all this beautiful stone, but they're actually building a 4-star hotel. And it's this kind of space where the brand needs to also come in and help. So I see it as a much more collaborative process where, you know, sometimes it's a case of money, sometimes it's a case of procurement, sometimes it's a case of brand, sometimes it's a case of design. And in each time, I don't think there's ever one that should trump another, but it should be taken as a collective and taken pragmatically, right? Sometimes you do need to have that little bit of bling, and sometimes you do need to have that extravagance, but other times you need to dial it back.
Okay. How much compromise is really going on? I ask that because of this question, just keying off what you just said. We have so many of these white label collections today coming out by the big brand groups. Is that not a response to this whole issue of localization versus globalization of the brand? Is that not the compromise? They were losing too many deals because people wouldn't accept their standards and they wouldn't localize. Was that an answer? Is that an answer?
I would say it's also a response to the market. I mean, look at what Airbnb's done. It's a disruptor, right? And so by being able to create
coming from a lot of directions.
Yeah, by being able to create these white label brands, you're able to be a lot more flexible with the product that you have, but you still have the distribution system that's backing you up. That engine is behind you. So I think there's a lot of factors that are making those white labels come through. I mean, some could just be your exclusion zone. You just can't build another Marriott in that neighborhood.
And a defense
Could be,
against
and also
diluting your own brand.
The white label brands, frankly, that work are the ones where there's an independent hotel which has a pretty strong presence already. But what's happened is they had a pretty strong presence in a market because there was no competition. And suddenly 7 or 8 brands have come into their town, and their sales and marketing people suddenly start saying, oh, we're losing this and we're losing that. Hey, we better link with a brand. And they don't want a marketing outfit like small luxury hotels of the world or something. So they go to one of the other brands who've now got these huge reservation systems, where the struggle that we find trying with this white label is when you've got a hotel that isn't built yet. You've got an owner who has a vision with a product, and they're coming to knock on a brand's door like Dusit to say, can you help us build our hotel in Krabi? And we go and look at it and we say, guys, it won't fit our portfolio of brands. Oh, but can you help them? And then it becomes a problem. No.
Okay, got time, I think, for a couple of questions. Anybody out there with a question for the panel?
Hello. Yeah. I'm Anil Sharma. I'm an architect from Delhi, and I've been doing hotels for the last 30 years. I actually want to congratulate Adrian for saying what he said about the buildings being done in glass by some of the international designers everywhere, and not even having response to the climatic conditions of the local conditions of the site. If I now, the question to Paul is, in your second, in answer to your second question, you said that if you have to think of luxury, you need to look at the global brands and global standards and things like that. Is that true? This is what you said?
No. What I meant by that was that within the luxury sets, that there is a lot more, your service has to be a lot more on, your operations have to be a lot more on. The little things that can go wrong in a quirky lifestyle hotel that you can put up with cannot go wrong in a luxury hotel, because the people that are paying thousands of dollars a night to stay there are expecting, if it's in Krabi and they're paying $2,000 a night, they're expecting New York quality of service, right? New York's pretty bad, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, but
so that's what I mean by as you go up in terms of that kind of space.
But there are some of the local brands. I mean, especially in India, the Oberoi's or Leela. I mean, they're local guys, and they're offering far better luxury than any other luxury brand in the world.
Oberoi is one of the best luxury brands in the world. It's not a.
I mean, it's not global, but
yeah.
And I think even Dusit local. I mean, I would consider Dusit to be a local brand compared to other brands. Or these guys are also doing some of the better job. So
yeah, but if I say Four Seasons, you instantly know if it's in Fiji or if it's in Paris exactly what you're going to get when you walk in. And I think that's where the design and the operations, the way that you plan it, everything has to be a lot more on point with it, with that type of a property. I'll put up with a lot less if I go into, like, where you stay in Kazakhstan tomorrow night. Your expectations are going to be a clean bed on a hot shower, right? It's not going to be 4-star. It's not going to be. You're not going to be thinking of anything, and a door that locks, right? Right. That's that. But that will be luxury tomorrow night for you. Right? Your luxury does change as you move around, but in terms of a global luxury brand, you need to have those types of things on point, and that's where, when you're planning those out, you don't have the flexibility. And I've worked on a lot of these, and it's wonderful to try to think that you can pull them in, but eventually that you have to understand that that type of consumer has a lot less patience for anything that goes wrong.
I think in just coming to India and having traveled around a lot there, on a business level doing projects, what I tend to find there is the service is excellent. The character of the people is wonderful. Yeah. The humanity of the people is absolutely fantastic. But when you turn on your hot water in the morning, in some Taj hotels, I'll get hot water like that. In some Taj hotels, geez, I've just drained half the city of water waiting for, and that's an engineering design. And it comes back to this point about global design being mainly on MEP and trying to put standards into that.
I deliberately did not mention Taj when I mentioned you won't say that in Oberoi's. Right.
We went the other way at Dream, on this whole issue of standards. We copped out completely. We designed a brand called Unscripted. And we had one in Vietnam. I mean, it's just like unscripted. Anything can happen in the hotel. The design can fluctuate. It was like the ultimate cop-out by the operator. Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much.